guys, welcome back to 17 square meters garden. I am finally going to plant my bulbs. I do have a few containers planted already because I posted some tutorials on this channel, but today I am starting to plant bulbs for real, starting with 250 daffodils. And that's not all of my bulbs, that's just daffodils, but I will admit it, I'm a bulb addict. I absolutely love bulbs because they are an inexpensive way to get a lot of flowers in spring. So today I'm planting some lovely daffodils. It's mid-November, and if some of you are thinking, well, that's a bit late, right? Well, it's not really. I prefer to plant bulbs as late as possible because I live in a quite warm climate. We are zone 8B. We do have temperatures below freezing, and for example, I think I was 2 years ago, at the very beginning of November, it was already -5 degrees Celsius. But this year the fall was really warm. October was so warm that I still had most of my summer flowers and they were blooming, and it was really rainy. So I prefer to wait when the temperatures will finally be so cold that you know that it's not gonna get any warmer. Because if you plant your bulbs in September and then the fall is really warm and rainy, it can trigger the bulbs to sprout, and in itself it's not an issue, but then it adds you more work because you are gonna have to go out. Once it starts to get frosty, you will have to go out and cover those fresh leaves with extra layer of soil or with mulch or with leaves or something like that to protect them. So to avoid that, I'm just waiting as long as I can, and I'm planting my bulbs sometime in November. So let's go out on the balcony. Let me show you what we are planting and where. Okay, so here are the bulbs that I'm gonna plant today. I have 2 large bags. There is about 50 bulbs per bag, and I have 2 bags of Narcissus Barrenwyn. They are just classic yellow daffodils, nothing really special. And they are gonna go on the railing here. I have 9 pots on the railing, and I already had yellow daffodils planted in them last spring. I really loved how they looked. I had also crocus with them, but this year I'm only gonna plant daffodils. And I actually kept the ones from last year, so these are the one that I had last year. These are pipit. I like them because they have multiple blooms per bulb. I think these ones are single bloomers. These had several, so they are perfect for like small spaces or small pots because you can plant only a few bulbs and then it will look like you have more flowers. So the reason why I'm not replanting the pipit daffodils in these pots is because pipit daffodils, they bloomed mid to late spring. And ideally, when you grow bulbs and you want to keep them for next year, you have to allow them at least 6 weeks to recharge. So you will cut the spent blooms off and you will leave the leaves until they die back naturally, or you will leave them for at least 6 weeks. And as I mentioned, because they were late bloomers, at the end of May, beginning of June, they were still very green, and it hasn't been 6 weeks since they flowered, and I already needed to plant summer flowers in these pots. So I removed the bulbs, like the entire bulb. I let them dry in the air, and I didn't want to throw them away because I had 90 bulbs. That was a lot. So I thought, well, I'll just keep them, we'll see what happens, and I'm gonna plant them at the back of the balcony in that large pot that I have there, because whether they bloom or not, it won't bother me because it's like out of the sight. But here in these pots, I want to have flowers that I'm sure that they will bloom and they will look beautifully. And for the pipit daffodils, I will plant them permanently in that back pot, and if they bloom in spring, that's lovely. If they don't, then they will have the entire spring to recharge and to hopefully bloom next year. The last bulbs that I have is a mix of daffodils. I'm hoping I will get such a nice variety as it's on the picture here. Because you know sometimes the pictures are misleading. So I want to plant a few containers with a mix that I'm gonna tuck in at the back of the balcony just for cutting flowers, because I really enjoy cutting a few flowers from my balcony. So I want to have pots that are just for cutting flowers, because I don't want to cut from the compositions that I'm creating because then it will look odd. So these are gonna be just for cutting. Okay, so let's start with the yellow guys, and on top of them I'm gonna plant the pansy seedlings. That's the pansies I grew from seeds. They are not in bloom yet, but that doesn't bother me. They will bloom in spring and they will create a lovely composition with these yellow daffodils. So let's go. Okay, so I already put some soil at the bottom of the containers. I'm using soil-based potting mix, but you can use multi-purpose, that works well too. So because daffodils are quite large, they will go at the bottom, like the very bottom of the container, roughly 2-3 times their depth. But you know, it doesn't really matter that much. If you plant them just a bit too shallow or too deep, it's okay. You know, just the principle, like 2-3 times their depth, and that's fine. The soil is a bit moist because it rained like crazy the past few days, so I'm just gonna place them on top, space them evenly, about 10 bulbs, and then I'm gonna cover it with soil and plant pansies on top. What I love about pansies is that they have very soft root system, so you can plant them on top of bulbs, and then bulbs can pierce right through their root system, and to bloom above them. So after in spring it creates lovely composition. You have the first layer of pansies, and you have bulbs, either tulips or daffodils, that bloom above them, and it looks really, really pretty. Okay, the pots are planted. I planted about 4 pansies in each pot, and I didn't have just enough, so I filled the empty spots with violas that I bought earlier in fall. And because the pansies are a mix of colors, I think it will still look okay, because it would just be a bunch of colorful flowers in the spring. Oh, and one thing that I forgot to mention is that you should always water your bulbs after planting, but today I'm not gonna water my bulbs because it rained like crazy for several days in a row, and as you can see there is still water standing in the saucers, so I don't want my bulbs to rot. Okay, so now onto this pot. It's the back of my balcony. As you can see, I already had bulbs planted here I think a couple of years ago. I really loved how it looked in here, so I'm gonna plant these PP daffodils that I mentioned at the beginning. They were planted in these pots. Not sure if they're gonna bloom, but we'll give it a try. I'm just gonna place them randomly in this pot. There is a hydrangea serrata blueberry cheesecake. She's absolutely beautiful, blooms early summer, and yeah, I'm gonna try to plant the bulbs around it. Okay, I try to squeeze as much as I can in that pot, and that's all I have left. Just a handful of bulbs. I will probably just plant them in some random pot somewhere on the balcony. So now let's plant the mix of bulbs. Okay guys, all the daffodils are planted. I cannot wait for spring and to see them bloom. And a few last words that I wanted to say about daffodils, because they are my personal favorite bulbs, and there are many reasons for that. First being that there are so many ones to choose from. There are thousands of cultivars, and they are all so different. You can choose short ones, tall ones, in shades of whites, in creamy yellows, in oranges with trumpets, double blooms. So many beautiful ones. I think that anyone can find something that they like. They are also very resistant bulbs. For example, I often plant them permanently on my balcony, so I plant them in pots and then I leave them in those pots in spring, and I plant summer flowers on top of them, and they do just fine. Even if you have to water those summer plants every single day in summer, those daffodil bulbs underneath will not rot out, and they also multiplicate really well. I just showed you a moment ago that one bulb with 4 bulblets on the side. They do multiplicate really well, so next year you will have more blooms from one bulb, and generally they're really low maintenance. You can plant them on your sunny balcony, on your shady balcony. For example, my balcony is northeast facing, so I do get a few hours of morning sunlight in summer, but in spring, so from mid-October till let's say mid-April, I don't have any sunlight at all. There's no sunlight that reaches my balcony during fall and early spring. So even though I don't have any sunlight, the daffodils, they bloom and they look beautiful. So if you are someone who doesn't have a lot of sunlight on your balcony, if your balcony is either covered or it's in the shade, daffodils are perfect for that. And especially those early blooming varieties, because those are more adapted to not having a lot of sunlight at the end of winter. So definitely early blooming daffodils would be a good choice if you don't receive any sunlight on your balcony. But as I said, even my balcony, until mid-October I have no mid-April I have no sunlight, and even tulips bloom for me, so don't really pay attention to that. Any bulbs, they will bloom. They don't really require full sun exposure in the spring, because even if it's written on the package that it requires full sun. You know that full sun in spring is not very intense, so most bulbs tend to bloom just fine even if you plant them in part shade. Okay, I still have a lot of bulbs to plant, a lot of different bulbs, tulips, hyacinths, muscari and stuff like that. I will probably share that with you in the next videos. But for now, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye! Alright guys, this is so creepy. I was just going here to grab my bag of soil, and then I see some black spot under, and there is like literally a tarantula on my balcony. There's plenty of those large spiders here. That's kind of creepy. They always... I'm not like scared of them, but you know, when you see something like this just jumping out of nowhere, it can make your heart skip a beat.